All right, let's come back together. All right, the correct answer, in case anybody didn't get it, is Scrubs. Is obviously the best group of friends out there. Yeah, so Scrubs is the best show of all time. The rest of your guys' answers, I'm sure, are fine too. So, all love there. Uh, all right, so at the beginning of the Bible, God lays out kind of his plan for what creation should be. And he says that at the beginning, after he had made everything, that it was very good. The word we've used a lot is the idea of shalom. Everything was just like at peace. Everything was just kind of this like, this is the way it's supposed to be. Almost. Here's why I say that. At the beginning of the Bible, some of you may know this, some of you may not, there's actually two different creation stories. And so the first page of the Bible, Genesis 1, tells a kind of a version, a lens, an interpretation, if you will, of how the world is created. And then you turn to chapter 2, kind of second page of the Bible, and there's like kind of a different version. And there's some similarities. God still was making stuff. God makes rivers, although at the end of one of this rivers, there's gold, so that's kind of cool. There's still animals. God still makes man. Man and God still have this like special relationship, and God gives the man responsibility. He wants them to like rule and reign over the world still, so a lot of similarities. But here's kind of like where it breaks up in this Genesis 2 version. Because in Genesis chapter 1, it has this like refrain of like, God made this and it was good. God made this and it was good. God made this and it was good. And then once everything is made, it's like now everything is very good. But then in chapter 2, he puts in this little line. So the Lord said, it is not good. Something in the middle of this shalom garden with all this beautiful creation, so much that is the way it's supposed to be. God and man, all these things are working together. But somehow in the middle of all of this goodness, there is something not good. And what was not good was for man to be alone. And so God's a problem solver. God doesn't want anything to be not very good. God doesn't want anything to be anything short of just his total plan of shalom for creation. And so God jumps in and he says, I will make a helper suitable for him. Today, we are continuing our series that we've been in for the last little bit, and we're looking at kind of who we are as a church, what we're trying to be, and we've kind of used our name, Christ Church Albany, as kind of these big buckets to explain who we are trying to be as a church, hopefully who we are becoming, who we are in many ways, hopefully already a lot like. And so we've talked on many of these weeks about the idea of Christ. What does it mean for us to be a group of people who are putting our belief in Jesus as like the weight of our life? So not just like intellectually, not just like, Jesus is fine, but to like actually make Jesus the king, the ruler, the Messiah of our life. What does that look like for us to make Jesus Christ? And we've talked about that. Then we've talked about the idea of church, that church is not something that you walk into. Church is not a service or an event that you attend. Church is something that you are. Church is a group of people. And so we want to talk particularly about how we interact as a group of people. And then we've talked about the idea that we want to be a blessing to the people around us. And so the city of Albany, the whole capital region, the entire world, we think the world should look different, better, that the love that we have should be making a cataclysmic effect on the rest of the world. I'm going to talk about that with Albany. But this week, we are talking about the idea of church. What does it look like for us to live together as a group of people? And our very basic agenda for today, that is not an easy agenda, is that we don't want, for us to be a group of people, we don't want anybody in this room to live their life alone. We think it's not good for people to live alone, to feel like you're alone, to feel like that you are doing life alone, to feel like that you don't have other people that you are in like community and teamwork with, that is not good. And we believe that God has made a solution, that God has made helpers. And so if anyone is alone, then the goal is for you to be linked with a helper or two or three to be able to help you through life. And that same agenda is the same for our entire world. That as we're trying to spread shalom, as we're trying to spread the gospel of good news around the world, part of the gospel is that if you are alone, God thinks that's not good, and God has an answer, and he wants you to be helped. God doesn't want anybody to be alone. And that's a pretty big deal as far as like what we believe as a church. Here's a couple other ways that we can say it. We believe that life is richer when we lean on one another rather than standing alone. Your life is actually better. Instead of when you're all by yourself, life is better when you are with other people. Here's another way you can say it. Instead of independence, we thrive through mutual dependence, which is kind of like very opposite of kind of the American dream, which is all about like, man, when I can stand by myself, when I'm independent, when I don't need anybody else, that's when I'm thriving in life. But this says when you're like completely dependent on other people, when you know I can't get through this day if I don't have the help of other people, that is what actual thriving looks like. Or last one, that strength lies in community, not doing it alone. Same idea. That it's not when like I've arrived at this point of like, I don't need any kind of like a social net. I don't need any kind of a system. Like maybe I'll take care of other people, but I'm fine. It's when you are actively looking for other people that is where real strength is. And why that's so important to us is that's really part of the whole story of the Bible. And so in the Bible, the beginning pages, God creates the world. God sets his plan for how the world is supposed to be. And then the Bible's kind of broken up into these big sections. And so the next big section that we call the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible is all about how God is trying to enact his plan to once kind of shalom was broken, kind of the plan got messed up because of sin, of how God wanted to reintroduce shalom, how God wanted people to better get back into relationship with him and with other people. And then the next big section is this little bitty section of what we call the Gospels. Mine is big print Bible because it's my grandpa's Bible. So that was section there that tells the story of Jesus. And so what we believe, talked about this over the last couple of weeks, is that the God of the universe who created the world and the God who was then working through and with the nation of Israel to try to bring shalom to the world, sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes it worked really well, sometimes it didn't work as well. That same God came to earth and tried to clarify to us what he'd been trying to do since the beginning. And here's the things that Jesus said when he came. One time someone asked him, Jesus, which is the greatest commandment in all the law? And Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. So here's kind of the most important is I want you to like put your weight on Jesus. I want you to make Jesus the king of your life. But he doesn't stop there. He says, and the second is like it, as in equal to, as in the same weight, as in these are both equal in priority, is to love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and all the prophets hang on these two. So according to Jesus, all the law and all the prophets, all the beginning part of the Bible, all the Old Testament, what they are all about is this idea of loving God and loving people. That's what God has been trying to do. And I bring that up and try to make it as like an emphasis because sometimes I think we want to pick. And sometimes it's like, okay, I can have like, I'm coming to church, I'm kind of getting involved, and I'm going to really work on my relationship with God. And if I have my relationship with God, then that's a really good thing. And I'm not in community. I don't really know other people. I don't know if I'm really changing the way in which I'm loving other people. But big success, I am loving God really well. Or, hey, I'm like getting involved in the community, I'm getting to know some people, I'm making some friends, but like really like centering my life on God isn't really a big deal. And according to Jesus, these two cannot be separated. This is what the emphasis of the whole thing is loving God and loving people. Jesus crystallized it more at what we call the Last Supper. Jesus is eating with his disciples. He knows he's going to die. This is kind of his last big words. And he says, a new command I give you. And the idea there isn't just like, I'm giving you like an additional command, like do all these other things and also try to do this. He's saying, I want to give you like a new summation command. I want to try to tie all of this together for you in one. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. And by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. I will know you are my disciples if you come to church every Sunday and my neighbors, your neighbors don't see your car in front of your house and they know you leave every Sunday. That's not how they're going to know. They're not going to know because of how much we know about the Bible, although it's good to know things about the Bible. They're not going to know what the characteristic, according to Jesus, that matters more than any other. His new summation command is this idea of, are you going to love one another? This is one of the primary things, if not the primary thing, that God wants to do in your life, is he wants you to radically love and be loved by other people. So, what does that mean to love and be loved? What does that look like to really love one another? And so now in the last part of the Bible, what we call the epistles or the letters. So this is Jesus came, Jesus lived, Jesus taught, Jesus died, Jesus rose from the dead. And then there's all these new Christians, very early church, they're trying to figure out, what does it look like for us to live this out? How do we actually, if we're going to make Jesus the king of our life, and we're actually going to do what he says, and if what Jesus said, the main thing we need to do is love one another, how do we actually do that? And so when you read through the epistles, one of the regular things you see is that little phrase, one another. Over 55 times in the epistles. This is like as they're trying to figure out how do we follow Jesus, one of the things that they want to try to, they're kind of collectively figuring out together is what does it look like for us to love one another? And they kind of like spell it out, give like commentary on it. And so in your program, I have printed some of the 55. Some of them duplicate, so I didn't put every single one of them in there, but there is a few of them in there. Mary, I'm going to have you go ahead and come up. And what I'm going to ask you to do before we go on is, instead of me reading these to you, I would like each of us to take a few minutes and read through each of these one another passages. And as you read through it, if you have a pen that's on your chair, what I'd like you to do is if there's a few of these that stand out to you, if there's something about one of these that just kind of like jumps out, maybe circle it, underline it, and just read through. As these early Christians were trying to figure out what did it look like for them to follow Jesus and love one another, this is how they are defining what does it look like in real life with my real neighbor, with real people in my life to love one another. So go ahead, read through those and underline, circle anything that stands out to you. have you keep looking through, but add or change your focus a little bit and maybe put a star or whatever kind of indicates to you. But is there one or two of these as you look through them that as you're looking at your real life right now, like the week you've just had, the week you're going into, which of these do you personally need most right now? What would you, if you could pick one of these and you could have somebody do this, love you in this way, which of these do you need most right now? All right. You can keep thinking about it. Feel free to keep circling and underlining as we continue our discussion today. Thank you, Mary. So here's what I want to do with the rest of our time is we want to try to get as practical as we can about this. Is I believe we all need those kind of loving relationships in our life, and other people in our lives need us to love one another in those ways. And what I equally believe is that that is not natural and it will not just happen. We need to be intentional about it. And what I also believe is that while this is a decent atmosphere for some of those kind of things to happen, that can happen while we're having coffee, while we're coming into service, coming out of service, some of our little conversations. Where this happens best is in much smaller, more intentional groups. So we're going to talk about one of the tools that we have, one of the tools that we encourage everybody to be a part of, that we call intentional discipleship relationships. Now, you might notice we did not put the phrase up there, community group or small group, and that's semi-intentional. We have community groups, we have small groups. One of the things that I've been trying to do for the last year and a half, 2 years as leaders is we want to try to change something in our brain that whenever you hear somebody say community group or small group, the phrase we want you to think is intentional discipleship relationship. And the reason we say that is because sometimes just being in a community group or a small group is not actually doing what we want to happen in an intentional discipleship relationship. And some of you have very much experienced that. You've been a part of a group for a while. Maybe you've been a part of a group in the past, and some good things came out of it. Maybe some bad things came out of it. I don't know. But as we look through all of these things of what an intentional discipleship relationship is, you might think, I don't know if that's really what I was in. And I've thought this personally quite a few times. I've been in ministry now for over 27 years. I'm very old. And I've always been in churches that have some sort of a community group or small group program. And I've preached many sermons about the idea of we want everybody to be involved in a group. I've been a part of a couple of different, even kind of small group, community group fairs. And so we'll get up and say hey, we want everybody to have loving relationships. Nobody should be alone. And people are I don't want to be alone. I want to be in a relationship. And so then they go and they sign up for a community group. And what can sometimes happen is we can have this like kind of over-promise, under-deliver thing, because we feel like everyone needs living relationships. You need deep friendships in your life, and join this group, and these are now going to be the best friends you've ever had. And you get together with them, and you're like, I mean, they're fine, but it's, I had a friend once tell me that he literally had the thing where he joined a community group, and then he was hanging out with a group of friends, and he's like, I got to go. And like, why do you got to go? Like, well, I'm supposed to like go hang out with like my friends, but like you guys are my friends, but like I got to go hang out with this like kind of semi-awkward group of people, and like this is going to be my group. And all that, like, we're all about the idea of like linking people, and sometimes you have no idea who you might end up in a deep relationship with. So we're not against the idea. We have small groups, we have community groups, but what we want is if you are in a group, we don't want it just to be a small group, because a small group, to define it, means if it's small and you are a group, you have hit the requirements of a small group. And we want you to be more than that. A community group, you can be somehow in your community. If you're doing anything fun together, now you are a community group. And that's great. We want you to be more than that. What we think every single one of us needs is to be in an intentional discipleship relationship. And this is a relationship that intentionally does all of these things that we're about to describe. And so as we're going through these, what might be helpful is if you are in a community group, you kind of think, hey, is my group regularly practicing these things? And is one of these, think of, the little barrel analogy, whatever slot is lowest, that's where the water is going to come out. Whatever one of these is lowest is probably kind of like what is like preventing your community group from being all that it could be. If you are not in a group right now or in any kind of intentional relationship, you can just think about maybe a few people that you would like to be in a group with, which is also important for kind of like how we do this stuff as a church. We are small church, small staff, and so sometimes it might come across as like we have a little thing on our connection card where you can click, I want to be in a community group, and sometimes that can kind of come across as like, okay, so we have this group of all this list of community groups, and we're just like waiting for you to sign up so we can link you in with a group. And sometimes that's worked. Sometimes we've been able to do that, and we do have some groups. But more of what this isn't really like a process thing. We don't have like a great system to like create relationships. What this is this is like, as Heather's been teaching us over the last little bit, this is a posture. This is a way that I am going to choose to intentionally interact with a few people. And if I interact with these people in this way, then it will become an intentional discipleship relationship. So this isn't like a program or a class that you join. This is something where you say, I'm going to intentionally, I want to live into these postures, and I want to do it with a group of people. Kind of make sense? Hopefully. Okay. So on your sheet, on your chairs, there is a list of some of the things that we call intentional discipleship relationships. So one of the first things of an intentional discipleship relationship is that it needs to be intentional, which means that this needs to be something that you make time for. One of my favorite quotes is from John Ortberg, and we've read this many times, that many people lack great friends for the simple reason that they have never made pursuing community a high priority. So let's have just a little discussion, and this should be pretty easy. What are some of the things in life that make it difficult to have regular time with friends? What are some of the barriers that you see in life, in your schedule, in your calendar that make it difficult to regularly get together and make friendships a priority? What are some of the things you see? Work. Yeah. Very true. What? Children. Oh my gosh, yeah. Totally. Well, wait till they get involved in sports, man. Whew, it's crazy. Yeah. What else makes relationships difficult? Perfectionism. Oh, that's good. I like that. There is a million things that if you look at your calendar, it's very difficult to itemize how am I going to make time for relationships. And so what I often find is when I ask people, hey, do you have friends in your life? Do you have deep friendships? A lot of times is they'll say, oh yeah, no, I got friends in my life. And they'll start talking about someone. I'm like, wait, how often do you get together with that person? It's like, well, we went to college together and we haven't talked in like a year, but we're really close. We used to, like, before we had kids, we used to go out and hang out. We used to have this like regular times where but it hasn't happened in a long time. And for a real relationship to happen, it needs to have regularity, proximity. There's something about just being involved in other people's lives. So a couple things that we encourage as far as regularly meeting with people. One, do fun things. This is communication. This is meals. This is fun activities. But then on the back, there's a handful of, I think, helpful, not easy tips to be able to do this. The first is that for you to really be in relationship, if you decide, you know what, I don't want to be alone, I want deep relationships in my life, then you might have to take a hard look at your calendar, and there might be some things you have to opt out of. You might not be able to be involved in every single thing. You might have to say no to some work, extra credit things. You might have to say no to having your kids in every activity. You might have to not be as much of a perfectionist about every single thing in your schedule. You might have to take out some things so that you can make time for this. But then the next ones, I really think this is something that should like fit into our real lives. This shouldn't always just be extra things. So I forget where it is on here. I think it's up one list. But one of the biggest things that will help with this is these are groups that should be small. This is one of the things we're trying to move from, like, in community groups, small group world, we've had small groups that are as much as like 20, 25 people before. And to try to figure out 25 different schedules is very difficult. Communication and some of these other things that we're going to talk about are more helpful with a small group. But just scheduling is so much easier when you have a smaller group of people. But then I encourage you, as you're thinking about who might be some people that you can be in these kind of relationships with, think about your real, normal life and how could this fit in? Could you do this during lunch breaks? Could you do this after Sunday service? Could you do this while you're running or walking? Could you do this while your kids are at practice? Could you do this while you're walking dogs? Could you do this while you're gardening? Could you do this while you're grocery shopping together? Is there things where I'm already doing this and you could involve somebody else in your life? I like that last line there of just be creative and strategic about how these relationships can thrive within your schedule and daily rhythms. There's a way in which you can figure this out. If it's a priority, you will figure it out. Next item on this list is the idea of to help each other grow. When we talk about these relationships, we are not just talking about having people that you do just get together and you go on a walk and you talk. Good friendships where you mingle and chat about the things of life, those are really, really great. But we are especially talking about this is a intentional discipleship relationship. This is a relationship where I'm going into this knowing I want you to help me to better love Jesus, and I want you to help me to better love Jesus. That's one of the benchmarks of how we're getting together is we're intentionally helping each other grow. So we're praying for each other, we're celebrating together, we're sharing our struggles, challenging each other, listening for God. And I'll talk about focus on application in a second. So one of the ways that people have found helpful in these relationships is that when you get together, you have something especially that you are going to talk about, something that's going to drive you back to a relationship with God. And so one tool I want to give to you for each series that we do, we have some sort of a tool that we think will be helpful for you to better discuss and talk about what we're talking about on Sunday morning. So starting beginning of December, we are going to be going through the book of Luke. Luke is one of the stories about Jesus and tells, hey, here's what the gospel is all about. Here's what Jesus did when he was on earth. Luke is 25 chapters long. Many of them are quite long chapters, and so we're going to break some of them up. And so this series that we're going to start is going to be at least 25 weeks long, and it's probably going to be at least double that. So get ready. We're going to be talking about Luke a lot lot over the next little bit, and that's going to be great because Jesus is kind of the whole focus of what we're trying to do, and so we want you to hear about what Jesus is doing. This is a great study guide, so we're going to encourage you to read through the book of Luke a lot over the next little bit, and we want you to process that. And so this little book, it's the New Testament Everyday Bible Study, going through Luke, and there's other studies that you can do too, but I think this one is really great because one of the things that you don't want to do is like have all kinds of homework when you get together. So here it is, folks. You read through a section of scripture. It's got 2 pages. We can fit this into our schedule of reading that gives us a little bit of background about what this is all about. And then you have a couple of different questions that kind of just cause you to reflect. Like, what does this look like for me? What does this look like in my real life? And so then when you get together, you're talking, you're hanging out, you're talking about your real life, but you intentionally say, hey, this past week we read about this thing that Jesus did. What does this look like for you? And so that could be a great tool, and there's other great tools just to make sure that when you're getting together, that it's not just like chit-chat about life and football and kids' activities. That stuff is wonderful too. We want you to talk about the real things of life, but to intentionally talk about Jesus and what it looks like for you to move forward, which is the last part of that, is this is really a focus on application. There's a couple easy kind of temptations, I think, with a group like this. One is to sign up and not be regular. The regular part is really, really important. Another temptation is to just make it about chit-chat. So you get together, you hang out, you're talking about normal things of life, but you're not really going deep into Jesus. Another temptation, though, is to make this all like philosophical and analytical. So this can become like just like very in-depth Bible study. And so everyone's getting together and sharing their views and disagreements. And here's what I think. And I read this. And that's great. I love to nerd out on that kind of stuff. But then you walk away and you've never actually taken time to look in the mirror and say, what does this look like for me, for you? And so the purpose of these relationships is to intentionally not just talk about what these scriptures are saying, but to ask the question, what does this look like for me? What does this look like for you? And how can we move forward with this together? And then when you get together the next time, the accountability question of, hey, last time we got together, Jesus said this thing, and it made you think, hey, I should really do this nice thing for this person at work. How did it go? What was it like? How can I help? And to actually be involved in each other's life. The next thing about this is to share openly. These are relationships that are about opening yourself up and actually letting people know the real you. Here's 2 questions that we like to ask a lot. The first question is, how are you doing? Really? And that's a great question to ask when you get together with an intentional discipleship relationship. What's like really going on under the surface? And then another question that we ask is, do you have someone who knows the real you? I spend a lot of time trying to like make people like be impressed around me. I want people to think that I'm a better dad. I want people to think I'm a better husband. I want people to think I'm a better pastor. I want people to think I have more hair. I want people to think way higher about myself than I really am. And to some level, like I get that. But you need at least a few people in your life who know the real you. So again, let's have a little discussion for a second. What are some of the reasons of why we don't let people see the real us? What are some of the reasons why we don't tell people how we are doing really? Makes you vulnerable, sure. What else? What? Pride. Oh, we don't think they really want to know, which could be true, right? And so, with all these, this is engaging in, the vulnerable relationship where it's like, this has to be both. Like, for me to really share, then I need to also have someone who really wants to listen and really wants to care. And that's a skill, both really sharing openly and really listening. That's good. Any others? Privacy? Yeah. Which is, again, that kind of vulnerability. Like, well, can I really trust you with this? Yeah, it's so true. And I get all that, but still, it's worth it to have those kind of relationships. Then the last one is to care and support each other, which I think goes hand in hand with the idea of sharing openly. Is when you actually take time to really share what's going on with your life, then that means that other people are going to now really know how to pray for you. They're going to know how to really show up in your life and help you. I've had so many things just over the last couple weeks where there's someone who I was talking to that was going through some sort of a really difficult thing in life. And no one knew about what was going on in their life. And so therefore, they were going through this really hard or just this thing they had to do, moving, whatever else. And they were going to do it all alone. That was their plan. And that is not good. You should have other people that are serving you and working with you in every part of life. Last couple tips for this. On the back there. Again, this is the idea of, for these to really work, there needs to be buy-in. As we're trying to transition of our phrasing of the community group is intentional discipleship relationship. That's one of the big pieces, because what can happen sometimes in a small group setting, and some of you have very much experienced this, where there's a leader who has a lot of buy-in. So they are preparing and they are prepping and they are doing a lot of work. And then there's participants, and the participants participate to different levels. And so I've talked to community group leaders, and this isn't like a dodge on anybody, but they're I text everybody, and it's I'm sitting there for community group day, and I wonder who's going to show up. I wonder if anybody is going to show up, because this person has put a lot of time and effort, and other people kind of see this as a program or class that they can participate with or not participate with. And I understand why we do that. And that's what this is. Sunday morning is a thing where we're so happy every Sunday you're here. When you're not here on Sunday, we do this anyways. We do this with or without you. This is something where, hey, we are a group that we are going to do this together, and we are all going to be bought in. Again, and that means that we're all scheduling it together. Everyone is kind of sharing not only what their words, but sharing the responsibilities. And I think it's going to be big to try to be able to keep that small as you go through it. Last thing before we end today. You are not meant to be alone. You're not meant to live your life alone. And I think a lot of us, if we are honest, are living more of our life alone than we should be. And there's something in here that's causing that. We're too busy, or we feel like we're too busy, or we're just not making the time. We are with other people, but when we're with people, it's pretty shallow relationships. They don't really know us, or when they're not really driving us towards Jesus. Maybe we've been with the same group for a while, and every once in a while prayer requests come up, and you're hey, I should share this thing, but there's this intimidation of could I really share this thing? There's something in here that is probably keeping us from the deep relationships that God wants us to live in, that is causing us to be more alone than what we should be. So I'm going to give just another couple minutes before we end. And I want you to think and pray. What is your next step this week? So as you think about an intentional discipleship relationship that God wants for every single one of us, what does that look like for you? Maybe it's taking a group that you're already a part of and kind of transforming it into even more of an intentional discipleship relationship. Maybe it's clicking the box on the connect card and saying, I want to be in a group, which again doesn't mean we have a ready-made group of people we're going to connect you with. But what we will do is I will listen to your story, or one of our leaders will listen to your story, and we will do our best to try to connect you with some other people that we think, hey, maybe if you guys got together, do it regularly. It might take a year or more, but I think you guys could develop some deep relationships if you made it a priority, if you really focused on Jesus together, if you were vulnerable enough. I think you could develop a relationship with those people, or maybe it's something different for you. Or maybe you're a part of a group and you just kind of been more on the peripheral and you have not really made it a priority, whatever it might look like. So what does that look like in your life? What's your next step this week? Take a couple of minutes and write that down, and then we'll pray.